and software architecture. That's what we're diving into today. And, there's so much buzz around AI right now, but we're going deeper than just the hype. We're looking at how one architect is actually using AI in his daily work right now. So we're going off of a brand new article from InfoQ. It's called How a Software Architect Uses Artificial Intelligence in His Daily Work. It literally just came out this week. So this is about way more than just like, oh, is AI going to replace architects? We're getting into like the actual hands-on stuff. Like, how is this changing the game for architects like you?
Yeah, and this architect, Avraham Poupko, he makes a really interesting distinction right up front. He says there's this fundamental difference between the way humans think and how large language models think. Those LLMs everybody's talking about.
Okay, so let's break this down. He calls it a world model versus a word model. I mean, I get that we humans have way more context, but what does that actually look like in software architecture?
Well, think about it like this. You can give an LLM a whole bunch of requirements. You can feed it all this data, but it doesn't actually understand the why behind them. It doesn't get the business nuances or the user experience that you're trying to create. It's working with words, not a deep understanding of the world that those words represent.
So is it like the difference between like reading a recipe and actually knowing how to cook? Like you need that intuition. You need to be able to adjust based on what's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where Poupko's experience gets really fascinating. He's not trying to get AI to like replace him. It's more about it being a useful tool. He even quotes the statistician George Box. All models are wrong. Some are useful.
Oh, I love that quote. It's such a good reminder that we shouldn't get caught up in AI being perfect. It's about finding where it's actually valuable. But, part of me is still a little wary. Like, are we going to become too reliant on AI and then lose those core design skills? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid concern. But Poupko actually addresses that directly. He compares using AI to using a book. It's a source of knowledge. But it doesn't replace your own judgment. You still have to select the relevant information, apply it creatively, and ultimately make the decisions.
Okay, so it's more of a partnership than a total takeover. But I'm curious, where does the rubber meet the road here? How's Poupko actually using AI in his work? Give us an example.
Sure, so he shares this great case study in the article. Imagine you get this requirement that says the system should be able to handle a large number of users. Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah, right until you actually start digging in. I mean, I've definitely come across requirements that seem totally straightforward at first, but then they turned out to be super vague.
Exactly. And that's what Poupko did. He fed that requirement into an LLM and asked it to pinpoint any potential ambiguities.
Okay, now I'm hooked. What did it find? I'm guessing large number is pretty subjective.
You got it. The LLM immediately flagged that. It was like, hold on, how many users is a large number? Is it 100? A million?
Yeah.
And then it also pointed out another ambiguity. Like, what type of users are we even talking about? Registered users, concurrent users. The difference is huge when you're designing a system.
Wow, that's actually really insightful. It's like the AI is the superpowered requirements analyst, helping you avoid those hidden traps that could totally derail the project later on.
Exactly. And this is where Poupko's approach is so smart. He doesn't just stop at identifying the ambiguities. He then uses the LLM to figure out ways to clarify those points, so then he can have more focused discussions with the stakeholders.
So it's not about AI giving you the perfect answer. It's about helping you ask the right questions, which then leads to a better design process.
Exactly. And, this example highlights another key point that Poupko makes. He's noticed that AI really excels at tasks that involve a lot of written language, which makes sense when you think about it. LLMs are trained on these massive text data sets.
That's interesting. It makes you wonder what other language-heavy tasks in software architecture could AI be good for? I mean, think about your own workflow. Are there any areas where you're spending a ton of time writing or analyzing text or even just trying to figure out ambiguous requirements?
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. And we're going to be exploring even more real-world ways that AI can be used in software architecture as we continue our deep dive.
Awesome. I'm ready for more. So we've seen how AI can be helpful for those really complex requirements, but it seems like that language-heavy thing could apply to so much more in architecture.
Oh, absolutely. Just think about all the documentation we have to create, design specs, API descriptions, even like internal reports. AI could be a total game changer there. It could take on a lot of those writing tasks.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a minute. Wouldn't that just create a new problem? Like we'd be drowning in all this AI-generated text. Who has time to read through all that?
Right. That's where you have to be really smart about it. It's not about just letting AI pump out endless content. It's about being strategic. Like say you use AI to create several different versions of a design spec. Each one is tailored to a different audience. You'd have one for the technical teams, one for stakeholders, even one for potential investors.
I see what you're saying. It's like having a whole team of tech writers at your fingertips, but you're the one who decides what they focus on.
Exactly. It frees you up to think about the big picture strategy, the stuff that AI can't really do.
But isn't there a risk that we lose touch with the details? If AI is doing all the writing, could we end up with these designs that are technically perfect, but they just don't have that human touch?
That's a great point. And it goes back to that idea of partnership. We can't just blindly trust everything AI spits out. We still need to review it carefully, use our own expertise, and make sure it matches our overall vision.
So it's like having a super smart assistant,
Yeah.
but they need a good editor to clean up their work.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And just like a good editor, an architect needs to catch those inconsistencies, those logic gaps, anything that just doesn't feel right.
This brings up another thing I've been thinking about. AI models, they're trained on these huge data sets. And we all know those data sets can have bias built into them. So how do we make sure the systems we're designing are actually fair, even when we're using AI to help us?
Well, that's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's something that every architect needs to be really aware of. It's not enough to just focus on making the tech work well anymore. We have to be advocates for ethical AI, pushing for fairness, transparency, accountability throughout the entire development process.
So it's not just about the code itself, it's about the values that are baked into that code. And that's something no AI can decide for us.
Right. And it ties into this bigger question. What does it even mean to be a software architect in this world where AI is becoming so important?
Yeah, the skills we need are definitely changing.
Absolutely.
What kind of skills do you think will be most crucial for architects going forward?
Well, first off, we have to become AI literate. We need to understand not just how to use these AI tools, but how they work under the hood, what their limitations are, and what the potential risks are.
So it's not enough to just know which buttons to push. We have to understand the algorithms, the data, the ethical considerations.
Exactly. And beyond that, I think communication and collaboration skills are going to be even more important. We need to be able to explain these complex AI ideas to stakeholders, work smoothly with data scientists, make sure everybody's on the same page.
So it's like we need to be fluent in tech speak and in human speak.
Exactly. And we can't forget about being adaptable. This whole field of AI is moving so fast. What's cutting edge today could be old news tomorrow.
So we got to be lifelong learners, always curious, always trying new things, always pushing the limits.
I think the architects who will really thrive in this new era are the ones who embrace change, who question their assumptions, and who never stop learning.
This has been a really insightful conversation so far, but I think we need to take a pause here. Let all of this sink in.
Yeah, good idea.
We'll wrap up our deep dive when we come back with some final thoughts, and maybe even some predictions about where software architecture is headed in this age of AI. So stick with us.
Wow, we have covered a lot in this deep dive. It's clear that AI is already changing how software architects work, from world models to, AI doing requirements analysis.
Yeah, and honestly, we've only just started. I mean, this field is moving so incredibly fast, and the impact on software architecture is really just beginning to show.
Okay, so let's put on our future-gazing hats for a second. What trends are you seeing emerging in software architecture as AI becomes even more integrated?
Well, one that really jumps out at me is this blurring of lines between software architecture and data architecture.
Well, that's interesting. Can you say more about that?
Sure. So as AI systems get more and more sophisticated, they're going to need these super complex and robust data pipelines. Architects can't just be focused on the application layer anymore. We have to think about data governance, data security, data provenance, like the whole data lifecycle. So it's like not just building a house, but making sure the foundation is rock solid and that all the plumbing works perfectly.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And it's all tied to another trend I'm seeing, what I call AI-aware architectures.
AI-aware architectures, is that like buildings that think for themselves?
Not quite. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
But basically, AI-aware architectures are designed from day one to work with AI systems. They're super flexible, scalable, and able to adapt as AI algorithms change.
So instead of trying to force AI into our existing systems, we're building systems that are AI ready right from the start.
Exactly. And this means rethinking everything, design patterns, deployment strategies, even the tools and frameworks we use.
And that sounds like architects will need a whole new skill set to succeed in this AI-powered world. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in the field?
Well, the basics are still important. A strong grasp of those core architectural principles is never going to be irrelevant. But don't just stop there. Dive into the AI world, learn about machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, all those foundational pieces of this revolution.
So it's this combination of the classic and the cutting edge. But with all this focus on AI, is there a risk of forgetting about the human side of software architecture?
Oh, that's such an important point. Technology changes all the time, but the core purpose of software architecture stays the same. Solving human problems, creating value for people. No matter how powerful AI gets, it's still the human architect who sets the vision, defines the goals, and ultimately decides if a system is successful or not.
So it's not humans versus machines, it's humans and machines working together to create something really amazing.
That's it.
It's definitely an exciting time to be in this field, but also a little daunting.
For sure.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I feel optimistic, but also cautious.
I agree. AI has so much potential to change software architecture for the better. But it's our responsibility to make sure this change benefits everyone.
Well said. This has been an awesome journey into the world of AI and software architecture. Huge thanks to our expert for all these insights, and to all of you listeners for joining us on the deep dive.
My pleasure.
Remember, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing those boundaries. Until next time.